understand what RAG is, it is Retrieval-Augmented Generation, which is basically instead of reaching out, you supply your AI with a collection of information and it only pulls information from that. And so it helps prevent hallucinations and just in general gives you a better control over your data. And so it's it sounds technical, but it's actually practical. It's not the magic prompts. And for the last few years, it's always been about prompting. Get your prompt, write the structure, get your audience and your role and your instructions and your context, and you create these elaborate prompts. But people save them and they do all sorts of different things. But what RAG does, it just allows you to build simple frameworks and use them more effectively, using them without being a prompt engineer or being a data scientist. And so here's the thing about prompts. If you've used AI for any period of time, you've probably collected prompts, whether they're from YouTube or LinkedIn or X. Everybody's promising the only prompt you'll ever need. But I even created a prompt library app. You know, it's like, oh, I'll take all these prompts and I'll be able to authorize them and approve them. And yeah, you just don't tend to use them. I mean, you can sit down and you'll paste one in if you remember where it was and you'll tweak it, try to get different results, and it never really works out. It's always generic and kind of meh. So you close a tab, you try to find something better, and then you just get exhausted because you're saying, okay, AI isn't really for me. And so the magic prompt does not exist, but this may give you a better approach to how you can be more effective with your AIs, your LLMs. So again, the prompt isn't the problem, and it's early on. I mean, we're talking first years of ChatGPT coming out before Claude or Perplexity or any of those, and AI had very small context windows, and the context is the number of tokens. And if you don't know what tokens are, those are chunks of data, about 8 characters, and when you use LLMs, you get tokens in and tokens out. And depending on the size of the window, you had to get different levels of how you could use that. And so when the first LLMs came out, there was about 4,000 tokens of context. And so basically a notepad, a page of text. Whereas now, with especially things like Gemini, the context windows are millions of tokens. And so now instead of a page, you can have an entire book as context. And so the prompt don't need to be as elaborate. They have better memory. And so you don't have to say, act as a senior marketing strategy with 20 years of experience in B2B and try to cram as much things into the prompt as you could. That's not as important anymore because of that million token window that you have now. And so it went from reading sticky notes to reading books. And so they don't tolerate, I mean, they want more context, and that's how you can clarify questions. And so the save prompts were typically a coping mechanism, and it was solving a limitation that doesn't exist anymore. So the prompt was never the problem. The problem was always giving a good way to give AI the context that you need for your business, your voice, your standards, your rules. And so by using this RAG approach, you can now do this. So there's a shift that's happening, and this is only recently, especially since a lot of the Claude stuff has been getting better and better, and there's Coworker and co-work and coding and stuff like that. But I follow a guy on LinkedIn. His name is Ruben Hassid. He's been around for a while, and he was a very big proponent of pushing OpenAI and ChatGPT. And he just was talking about how to build better prompts, and he built a prompt GPT and got a lot of use. But he recently started coming up with this idea of using RAG style approach to prompting Claude. And so he just creates a folder called markdown files for Claude, and he puts in various context. And with these files, it could be how you like to talk, what your voice is, what your copywriting rules and guidelines are, or whatever you can contextualize. You can put these into structured markdown files and load them into your RAG system, and then use those to generate, and then you can have a conversation instead of writing a huge prompt. And so you create these context markdown files, use them whenever you can, and then you carry on a conversation. Because I don't know if you're familiar, one of the newer features of Claude is ask me questions, which is a really cool approach. And so now you can have more conversational conversations with these LLMs, which is what the original context was to have conversations instead of asking questions like Google search used to be. And so, retrieval-augmented generation is basically context file system for your entire operations. There's documents, there's a retriever, and then a generator. Very straightforward. So you create, whether they're your standard operating procedures, your FAQs, policies, processes, whatever you want, you structure these into individual markdown files and use those markdown files whenever you have a project that you want to deal with. So instead of asking ChatGPT a question, hoping it guesses right, and if it doesn't guess right, it'll hallucinate and be very confident in its hallucinations. And so now you can look at this file cabinet first, and you can say, use only this. And then if you don't know, you can go out and search the internet, but start here. So it's not a prompt library, it's a knowledge library. Unlike prompts, you don't have to remember and customize. You just have to remember where your rules are in which files. And so with those files, then you can do the ask me questions based on those, and you can get a more conversational session with your LLM. So when you ask an AI agent, now this is different than agents, but this is a forerunner to agents. And so before you get into agents, you want to build this concept, because agents can take advantage of it. And so the agents would be handling customer service tickets or managing onboarding or processing refunds, whatever, and it's automated. Whereas they're not quite ready for it because they don't have an answer layer. And so if you skip straight from prompting to agents, you're losing a lot of structure. You're reading messy, conflicting, outdated data. You may not know the right sources. There's all sorts of ways that these automated processes with agents can go wrong if you don't have a structured foundation. And so if you build this answer layer using RAG and get familiar with it, you can then apply that to agents going forward when you're ready for agents. And so answer before agents, it's boring, but essential. So here's your small business today. Your teams keep asking the same type of questions. How do we onboard a new client? What's our refund? Where's the template for X? And depending on who you ask in the business, you may get a different answer. And so again, the answers may be on a Google Drive or Notion or in a PDF that somebody emailed you a while ago. And so you're looking over all of these different sources, trying to remember where that information was stored. And so is it the most recent? Is it something somebody gave you 2 months ago? Or is it stored in a library of current things? And so wasting time, creating inconsistency, it becomes very frustrating. And again, if an agent did this, it would be the same thing, but you should be able to figure this out first. And so if you have a structured markdown file with the exact statement of or standard operating procedure sections, then it will read those and give you a real answer and not magic. It's not a helper, it's just structured data in a common location. So here's what I want to cover with the demo, but I'll go over the 5 foundations that should be clear before you start doing this. These are boring things that need to be done, and they're time consuming to set up, but when they're done, they're very useful. And so first thing is to turn your documents into reference files. So this is kind of a mind shift. You don't need all of the content of a document. You only need certain structural pieces of that. And so most business documents are written for humans and not for AI. And so what you're doing is you're condensing the human document into an AI document. So good reference document structure would be something like if-then logic if possible, concrete examples of how to use rules, what to do, what not to do, guidelines, guardrails. You don't want a 20-page PDF that mixes policy and processes and how-tos and reference tables. You want individual small markdown files that cover each of those principles. So yeah, when applying this, you just want to structure reference files, if that makes sense. So the next is to pick one home. So have a standard reference data source that all of these documents are stored in that everybody can use consistently. And so if you have them spread across your email, your Google Docs, Notion, Slack, whatever, just create a folder on your Google Shared Drive or a Microsoft OneDrive or whatever, just a place, Dropbox, whatever everybody has access to in a standard way. Create a markdown files for your company folder, and then start putting in things like your client onboarding, your refund policy, your support FAQ, your billing terms, your product specs. And so these are now your reg collections. And so you reference this markdown files for your company and you get better return on the questions you're asking. So that's your foundation. Next, within these files, you set retrieval boundaries. You want vetted, proven standard operating procedures. Your current policies, you want to have somebody responsible for maintaining these and keeping them up to date. And so it may be a new task, but somebody should be responsible. It's in this human in the loop type approach that somebody needs to maintain this directory. So you're not dealing with scratch pads, you're not dealing with outdated folders, they're not personal notes. Now, the one thing to remember is that if you're dealing with sensitive human resource or financial policies or information, these should live in separate collections that have guarded input. And so have your appropriate roles that can read these. Don't mix public-facing FAQs with internal financial documents. You just have to make sure you separate them and don't confuse the two. And so clear boundaries make better retrieval, reduces your risk, and you're not building a cool tool, you're building a system on how to utilize the information stored in these documents. Let's see, I lost that. There we go. So now this is one thing I'm not covering with Notebook LM, but in some of the reg systems that you can get, they do allow you to actually set behaviors and set limitations and make it forced into citing where you got the information from your data. And so every single answer may include snippets from your documents, but if you're using multiple sources that have external citations, you should include those citations, and then you can tell your reg to actually specify where this data came from. Again, Notebook LM doesn't do that, and that's what I'm going to be demoing today, but there are some that do this, and it is just adding additional levels of trust. So then let AI prompt your team. Now, this is something that I mentioned earlier about Claude added this, was ask me clarifying questions before you answer. It's the ask user question. All is one word. If you put that into your Claude prompt, it will start asking you questions to get more context of what you want answered. And so using these reference files with your basic information and ask user question, you can now have it start questioning you, and that's where you start getting into this more conversational mode with your LLMs, because it's asking you questions, you're going back and forth, and so now you're actually creating true conversations with the LLM. And so if you're training your team to have back and forth with a helper, it's not fire and forget, gets better answers, makes the helper more useful over time, you start to see patterns, and so again, you're having conversations and not prompts. That's the whole idea behind reg. Okay, so in this demo that I'm going to do, I created a few different files, and I'll switch over to here. And so I created this client onboarding folder, and in this I have 4 different files, and each one looks like this. So here is the client onboarding. Shows your purpose, your scope, your process steps, your contract signature. So all of these is Markdown. Now, if you don't know Markdown, in the reference, I do have a Markdown reference sheet here that just gives you what these syntax is, so headings and bold and numbered and stuff like that. So if you're not familiar with Markdown, there's a quick reference guide in here. But so what your Markdown is just separating it and structuring your data. You're providing edge cases, you're providing your contacts. In the onboarding steps, here is all of the emails that you normally send out to people. In the billing, it gives all of your late payments, what your payment methods are, what your how to retain clients, what your scoping is, what your cancellation policies are. For the onboarding standard operating procedure, this is for your FAQs. And so each one, if you have all your FAQs, you can now put these in here. And so what I went and did is go into Notebook, and I created a new notebook and said, add these sources. And so I just took those Markdown files, and now when I go into my notebook, I can start just asking questions. And so now again, I mentioned some of these reg systems that you can use can show you your citations and sources, but I'm going to bypass this one here. So again, it'll display snippets from exact documents, and if not, you can have fallback rules, so it's not found in the documents if there's no strong match. And so instead of saying, I don't know, or hallucinating and coming up with something confidently, it will tell you it does not know or it does not have that information. And so again, building trust and reliability. And so now, when we get into it, we can start asking questions, asking like a human. And so if we go into here, we can start asking questions like, excuse me, what are the steps to onboard a new client? So now, just going in, and it's researching what's in these 4 files. And it's saying that based on the sources, your monthly retainer covers 1,000 or 3,000 in monthly recurring revenue. A contract, let's see, first of all, you need to have a contract signed, goes through all of the details. Then you're sending a welcome email within 24 hours, shows the template that you're using, what the content looks like. Then your next step is to kick off a call within 48 hours, what the attendance is going to be, the duration, the agenda, and then what the delivery is going to be with all the terms. And so now, instead of trying to find out who has the information about the onboarding, you can get a full onboarding answer. So the next one would be something like, can we skip a kickoff call for small clients? And I'm using WhisperFlow, by the way. And so instead of typing, because my typing is really slow. And so if you haven't used WhisperFlow, very cool tool to have. So all I do is hold one key down on my keyboard and talk and let go, and it enters in. And so now it's looking through all of the recommendations, going through here and referring. And so this is based on both the client process and the FAQ documents. Monthly retainers are 3,000. You generally cannot skip the kickoff call for these. The policy states that calls are required for all retainer clients. And so if they explicitly request to skip it, you can't do it. You can get approval from the account manager. There's alternatives. And so again, more detailed answers that you don't have to run around finding out if we can skip this call. So continuing on, we can say, who sends the email welcome and when? Again, going through, it'll probably look at the onboarding and the FAQs, onboarding templates in the process. It looks at the emails. It says the account manager sends them within 24 hours. So now, to show that it's keeping up with what's in here. What I don't have is anything about pricing or strategies or anything like that. So if I asked, what should our 2026 pricing strategy be? Now it should come back and say that I don't have enough information to provide an answer on that, but let's see how that works.
As quickly as possible. Thank you. At Wellstar, we
Uh,
believe.
so please pause. Can somebody mute? I'll look at the chat, and if you could put something in. Okay, David, I see. Would it be possible for Notebook LM with your Google Drive so you can say, create role permission? Notebook, right now, I haven't used Notebook with Google Drive, but if there is that connection, you should be able to do that. Anyway, going back, so again, now here it said the pricing strategy currently available. It says that our sources do not contain current pricing processes. And so the retainer threads shows that $3,000 in monthly recurring revenue is there, and the discounts, but it's not having anything to do with anything about pricing strategy. It's only supplying information that is currently there, nothing about strategy. It's only documented information. So let's go on to, okay, so now going back. Asking like a human. So instead of having the three different, instead of searching through all these different folders and texting for basic questions, you have one reliable helper that is consistently sourced, and in 10 seconds you're getting answers instead of running around finding the right person and taking 10 minutes to do that. And so going on to the next slide here. Go. So now we have the answer layer, and the next step is when you start looking at agents. So now that you have an answer layer in RAG, your references files are clean, you have a helper who's consistent, and now phase 2 would be to go to an agent, and the agent will read the exact same reference files that your helper is using. You can always refer to it in the same onboarding emails. And to contrast what happens if you skip this answer phase and you go directly from prompts to an agent, you often have the messy, conflicting, outdated data. And so you just want to make sure that you test this idea first, and it easily goes into being able to configure agents. So now here, what does it look like? So your success criteria is for one clear home for your reference docs. Make it a shared folder that's one person is responsible for. It's an authoritative documentation that lives in one place and everybody knows. 2, your team can ask process and policy questions, get consistent sourced answers in under 10 seconds, not eventually, not pretty fast, 10 seconds or less, that should be your bar. 3, you should have a list of 10 to 20 tested questions that cover the most critical thing your helper needs to answer. And so whether that's policies, procedures, guidelines, guardrails, and again, remember, you can always tell it what not to cover within these source files. And the one that people tend to forget is the not found, which is the last few times, if you're okay with it, you'll never see the not found. And so the not founds are actually really good because you know it's not hallucinating and coming up with things that it doesn't have an answer for. So for you, what your 2-week plan should be is to pick one domain where people ask the same questions over and over and over. You collect 5 to 15 pages and you turn those into 3 to 5 focused reference files. You clean up conflicting information, you test that, you validate it, and then in week 2, you start putting these into your RAG helper, whether it's Notebook LM or some other tool that you may have written or purchased, but there are multiple ways to use this. Notebook LM is just a very easy way to do that. And then once you have this set, then you have your RAG files that everybody can get to and start asking the same questions. No matter what your LLM is, you can reference these. And again, it could go into model context protocols on MCP servers that can guide it into these reference libraries. And so there's a lot of some of the previous episodes I did were for talking about MCPs and things like that and how to prep for agents. And so look back at some of my past recordings and you can understand those concepts. But an MCP is basically a hub where you can say, use this to go to various sources, kind of like a USB for data. And so what your readiness is if you want, I can help you do an audit, help you create some of these initial files. We can assess where your knowledge lives, how conflicting data is updated, build you some pilots. However, it's a practical tool agnostic roadmap. We can help you figure out a better way to do things and reduce the amount of prompts that you're trying to solve. And that is all I have for this. I'm going to stop my share